incredible lineup again that goes from Kenya to Switzerland and to the US, and we have Washington with us, and Eva, and I think Rupali and Pradeep will join us from India, and Cattaneo hopefully will also be there. I see her name up there. So thank you all. Before we start, very fast, Eva, where are you and what time is it?
I'm near Zurich, Switzerland, and it is 2 minutes past 10 in the evening.
Great. Washington, where are you?
I am in Nairobi, Kenya, and it is 11:03.
Amazing. Anne?
I can't believe you did this, Frank.
We got it done, yes.
I'm in New York, the epicenter of the pandemic, but it's only 4 in the afternoon. It's quite hot, and I had to put an ice cube tray under my laptop to keep it from overheating.
Amazing. This is high-tech and low-tech solutions. Rupali and Pradeep, where are you? And let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about you and your work.
Sure. Hi, I'm Rupali. This is Pradeep. And we are in Pune, which is about 150 kilometers away from Mumbai or Bombay. And it's raining.
So this is the northeast of India?
No, the
East.
west.
Just
The
east.
west.
Mumbai is on west.
Mumbai is on west, but we are on the western part of Maharashtra.
Okay.
India.
Mm-hmm.
And it's raining currently, so it's cooler. So we'll just introduce ourselves. We'll go in
please.
turns. Perhaps I'll go first.
Yeah.
So hi, I'm Rupali Bhave. I'm a theatre practitioner. I'm an actor. I'm a theatre trainer. I'm a translator. And I work with a collective called SMART, which stands for Strategic Management in the Art of Theatre. And I have founded my organization called Jacaranda, through which I work with children between the ages of 10 and 16. And I teach theater, I create plays with them. And Pradeep?
I am Pradeep Vaiddya. Hi, and I am a writer, director, lights and setting designer, music composer, and theater trainer. I recently co-created a black box space, first of its kind in Pune, titled The Box. I co-created it with Rupali, and we started the work for that particular venue just before the first lockdown, and that is now in shape right now. So this is what we are.
Amazing. And so we heard, from Anna Rupa, about the complicated situation that India is experiencing. Less than one, most probably less than 1, or perhaps less than 2% vaccinated, perhaps up to 3 million victims of COVID. And nobody knows exactly the numbers. And Anna Rupa pointed us the picture, how hard it is to get, food and the basic things to artists, that so many people are leaving the profession, that artist town, she's so close to 10, 15,000 artists who are traveling artists, are deserting it. And she says it's existential and devastating. So we just welcome Abhishek, the great playwright and director from India, the co-creator of the marathon here. And it came out all of a conversation with him, that we do this. And Abhishek said, this is a political crisis. It's almost state-sponsored murder. India has enough resources, but it's not organized in a way that is really helping us. And the only thing that would help us is some attention from the outside. It was a sentence he said, and then we decided to do this big 24-hour marathon. So Rupali and Pradeep, what do you see? How is the moment in your place? How do you feel?
It's very difficult, and it's kind of a roller coaster. It has been throughout the pandemic, but more so now. When the pandemic first started, the lockdown happened like this overnight, and just all of a sudden everything came to a standstill, and that was a pretty big shock in itself. And the first month especially was excruciating, just figuring things out and dealing with it and all that. Then we got into a rhythm of that. Then slowly things started opening, and very naively we thought, well, we are soon inching towards the end of this all. And then the second wave hit, and then there's the lockdown, and now it's even worse than before. The thing is, one thing that is very, very striking, like Anurupa said or Abhishek has mentioned to you earlier, Frank, is the staggering apathy of the powers that be. In fact, they've behaved in a very myopic and self-serving manner, and thousands are suffering, have been suffering. And since we belong to theatre, we know firsthand what is happening with the theatre workers and how difficult the situation is for them. And so that's there. That's very difficult, very disturbing, in fact, rage-inducing, if I might say so. But on the other hand, something that's very heartening is that ordinary people have stepped up to help other people in need. And without any kind of support from the government machinery, the administration or so, just ordinary people coming to the help of other ordinary people. And I'm so happy to say and see that artists and especially theatre practitioners have been at the forefront of relief work, and so that kind of gives us hope as well.
To give us some examples in theatre that we are doing, we ran our plays for 7 months, from September to April, and during that time, our ordinary, otherwise who are considered ordinary, our backstage members, backstage workers, they decided that we will not charge for anything that will supply to the theatre makers in Pune. So whatever shows happened at our venue, they just charged for their own labor charges, but they did not charge for the material that was given to those presenters of shows or whatever. Secondly, as Rupali said, common persons are reacting in a collaborative manner. They are proactive, they are supportive. But those who are playing in millions, those who are close to power, those who are millionaires, are not just considerate at all in any kind of situation which affects the economics. Like we lost 10%, sorry, 1/3 of our project cost just on holding the space, holding that place over the lockdown. 1/3 of our project cost in just paying the rent for the lockdown period. And that's
insane.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, nobody is considerate that there is no income, there is nothing that is happening, the activity is not allowed, and still that is happening.
Also, the very weird thing is that the state of Maharashtra has allowed performances with a restricted capacity, but they put in a rider that yet every municipality can decide for itself. And so strangely, Pune Municipal Corporation, the city that where we live in, decided that all businesses can partially resume except for theatre alone. And so in Pune, there's no theatre happening. And I fail to see the logic. There is no study, there is no scientific evidence to prove that theatre causes or helps to spread. I'm laughing out of frustration, actually.
Interestingly, we conducted a survey from among those around 1,000 people who attended shows during those 7 months, and
at
we
the
got
box.
at the box, and we got responses from 240 people. So we had 240 respondents from the around 1,000 people who came in as audience. And from those 240, we had only 3 cases who were COVID positive within the 5 days window from where they came to the box. Out of them, just one had no other evidence of having contact anywhere else. I mean, he contacted COVID somewhere in between that zone. But there is no such evidence, there is no such survey that was done over millions of people who contacted COVID over 1.5 years. I have written to the CM, to the mayor of our municipality, that we must conduct those behavioral studies, giving them example of AIDS. I mean, HIV was earlier considered as sexually transmitted disease, but then afterwards, as the studies went on, it came to notice that it was transmitted through needles, it was transmitted through lifestyle, and there were several other factors they were also involved. But we are going on the same old model that was presented to us 18 months back.
Yeah, and I think statistics, at least also in Germany, that were done, shows theater spaces are quite of the safest one. It is office spaces without windows. It is restaurant closed spaces, very small businesses without ventilation. It was the same absurd situation in France. Libraries and bookstores had to close. Alcohol stores were open. Churches could open to any kind of numbers of singing church members, but even 20 or 30% seating in theaters was not allowed. There is absolutely no sense to it, and it just shows, you know, the kind of prejudice against it. So, but how can that be? A question to Rupali, Pradeep, and Abhishek. How can it be that Abhishek has to be up night after night after night, connecting hundreds and hundreds of people, talking to people who are dying? Actually, did die. He said, you know, we talk to people, we can get them to the hospitals, and they often die. Our volunteers freak out. They leave it. They cannot take it. They have psychiatric care is needed. Abhishek became an expert in buying oxygen machine and repairing them. How can that be? What is wrong in India in that sense? What do you feel is missing? It's a rich country. It's a technologically innovative country. It has, as Abhishek said, all the things that could be done. What is wrong? What is missing?
According to me, I think COVID is no more calamity for our politicians. It's an opportunity for them to get something out of that. They are just riding on that wave to extract individual benefits, their own benefits for their political whatever. I mean, the advantages that they can take out of that situation. They are not really concerned about public health. They are not really concerned about anything that we are talking about right now.
It's shocking, and the rich flew out on private planes and make more money. Rupali and Pradeep, did you prepare a reading for us? Did you bring something if you want to share? Yeah.
Sure. We'd like to. Yes. In the email I received from Tanvi, she had said that bring it in as a tribute to somebody who passed on. I am just going to expand that sphere a little bit, and I'm going to recite and sing a poem in Hindi by an eminent poet, Gulzarji. I am going to share the English translation on screen, and it's an extract of his poem that speaks to hope, and that says, "Don't lose hope yet." And I would like to share this for everybody who's lost their spirit, their passion, their livelihood, and their life. So this is for all of them. I'm just going to share screen, and let's see. Where is it? Oh. English translation, where is it? Just pardon me, I'm just going to quickly. Oh no. A minute. Yeah. All right. Okay, I'll share it and I'll recite.
Yeah.
Okay, is it visible?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. अभी न पर्दा गिराओ ठहरो के दास्ता आगे और भी है अभी न पर्दा गिराओ ठहरो अभी न पर्दा गिराओ ठहरो अभी तो टूटी है कच्ची मिट्टी अभी तो बस जिस्म ही गिरे हैं अभी तो किरदार ही बुझे हैं अभी सुलगते हैं रूह के गम अभी धड़कते हैं दर्द दिल के अभी तो एहसास जी रहा है अभी न पर्दा गिराओ ठहरो के दास्ता आगे और भी है अभी न पर्दा गिराओ ठहरो
Wonderful. Thank you.
I-
Don't drop the curtain yet. Wait. Feeling still lives on, you know. So why did you choose this poem?
To me, it represents in part the loss that we have suffered, and yet the hope and the will to go on beyond all of this and survive and then thrive. And that's the meaning that this holds for me. It's also about actually about death. So the interesting thing is 3 days before the first lockdown hit, we performed the 25th show of one of our performances called Parting with Words, which is about which is a performance, a presentation of death poetry. And then the lockdown, the pandemic hit, the lockdown happened, and the last year and a half or more has been repetition of death of all kinds.
Yeah.
So Pradeep will now sing a Sanskrit verse from the ancient Indian scriptures, Upanishads, and I'm going to share the translation of that, English translation of that on screen now.
Okay.
असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मामृतं गमय सर्वेऽपि सुखिनः सन्तु सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्.
Wonderful, wonderful. Really, really, thank you so much. Let awareness lead me to the truth. I think this is what we really need, to be aware and the truth, and because the truth is the truth, and it is not debatable. So thank you both, really, really, for joining, for being with us. Thank you. I hope you can.
Tanvi, Frank, HowlRound for this initiative.
Thank
We are
you,
very,
Of
very
course,
happy
this is
to
the
be part
least we can do to also share our compassion for Abhishek and everybody. But let's move on. I hope you both can stay to Eva and Washington, actually, and Cattaneo, who was with me on the Siegel talk, and we also often speak and talk. She said, you know, you really should think about Eva and Washington and to invite them. So tell us, both of you, you know, what did you both do together? Who are you, for everybody who don't know you are? Maybe Eva, you start.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Eva. I mostly live and work in Switzerland. I direct, sometimes I act, and recently with the pandemic, increasingly I've been writing. About 60% of my work, I work with non-professional actors in Switzerland. We have a very strong sort of community theater scene that has to do with the fact that the language that we speak is not a proper language, but we still speak it. And so that's quite interesting, because that way I work a lot in rural communities. I believe the divide between sort of conservative versus progressive, etc., that every country knows. Well, in our case, it's a city countryside divide. So that's why it's very rewarding to do this work with amateurs.
Washington, tell us a bit about you.
Oh, my name is Washington Omondi Obwanda. I'm a Kenyan director. I live in Nairobi, Kenya. And also I'm a community director, forum theater facilitator, and also I train high school drama festivals.
Yeah. So, and you both collaborated together, and it was so complicated, right? And you were trying to bring him to Switzerland, and it was not really possible, right?
Well, actually, when we collaborate, the two of us were just fine. It's sort of the world that seems to have some kind of a problem with it. So we collaborate. We're edging towards our third collaboration. We worked once together in Kenya on a forum theater play about female dressing, how females dress and modesty, and like everybody having an opinion on it. This was devised by the company and then written by Washington and directed by him. And then a couple of years later, we started working on a part documentary, sort of a mixture between theater and a video installation with a third lady. And the difficulty there was that we wanted to do the first series of performances in Switzerland and to get Washington to be allowed to travel to the Schengen area was quite a little adventure, because clearly a Kenyan theater maker is the greatest threat ever to the Festung Europa, to the stronghold of Europe.
Yeah, it was quite shocking, you know, when you spoke to us, you know, what difficulties you had to go through. We thought this is no longer the case, you know, how we spoke about India, also about the complications, the castiness, as someone said before, you know, but that this is also part of your experience in Washington. How is the moment? How do you at the moment experience the corona? How is it in your place in Kenya? Are people more affected, less? Is it getting better or worse? What is going on?
Okay, here is still we are still struggling because even we are not even reached 1% of us has not even gotten the first dose of the vaccine. So the corona is still spreading. So far, we have around almost 5,000 people who had died because of corona. And then we always have not less than 3,737 cases of those people who have tested positive so far. And in a daily basis, we always report not less than 20 people dying every day because of corona. So those who are, at least we are struggling to get vaccine from countries in Europe, but still is we just have to be patient, because we were told that the vaccine was supposed to arrive like last month. Until now, we are in the second month. We are still waiting for the vaccine. People are still dying of COVID. Just yesterday in the news, they were trying to approximate that maybe around next year in August is now when at least our country will be somehow free from this COVID. But again, we are not sure about it. And then ironically, the politicians, you know, next year we are having our general elections. So the politicians have started campaigning, and they don't care about the people, because, you know, the social distancing, the COVID restrictions, they just do their campaigns, and that also help in spreading of the disease. But we believe, because it's around 1% of the population have at least received the two vaccines, and most probably they are the ones who have already received the two vaccines, so they are okay. And now they are going around campaigning, and people are gathering and all sorts of those things. So we are expecting our fourth wave, maybe in 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks
Then
from now,
other part of the country has been locked down. Like right now, they have locked down around more than 6 counties in Kenya because of the COVID. When there was an outbreak from India, and you see in the western part of Kenya, we have so many Indians who are businessmen, they do business there. So when the outbreak was in their country, some of them came to Kenya, and now the politicians were saying that the ones who is spreading the COVID in those part of Kenya, and now they decided to lock them those counties down. So it's really tough. It's
complicated.
Very complicated.
And you have to think that Africa is a country where there is not enough money to buy measles shots. 400,000 people die each year of malaria anyway. And now, of course, this catastrophe is hitting, and there will also be no real solution for the Western world if there's not everyone on planet Earth is vaccinated. It is so complex and complicated. You are what we think one of the advanced countries in the world is Switzerland. Where are you? So how is the situation there?
So our vaccination is progressing among those who choose to be vaccinated. Since mid-April, things have been opening up at quite a rapid pace. I've noticed that when it comes to theater gigs happening, it's a bit of a watershed in that people who consider theater a business and a means to gain revenue, they are very hesitant to produce. And those who see theater as a mean of civic discourse as something that needs to be, they are out there and they are finding ways that theater can happen regardless. This actually applies to city, countryside, regardless. I just want to, after what Washington said, I want to share an anecdote that happened to me today, just to sort of tell you where we're at. So about roughly 40% of our population has received both vaccines. I think that's where we're at. So today I accompanied an elderly person to the pharmacy to get their first vaccine. This was shortly before the pharmacy closed. And as the pharmacy, I waited with the person. You have to wait 15 minutes to see if you're okay with the vaccine. And then the pharmacists were phoning around frantically. They had extra vaccine doses. They were trying to get people to come in to be vaccinated, and they eventually gave up, telling me that, well, you know, it's one of the first sunny days in a while. The people are all sitting at the lake. That's why they're not coming in to be vaccinated. They chucked those doses. I feel so ashamed.
Yeah, it is shocking to think, you know, how hard people around the world fight. For us, also New York now, it's of course better how complicated it was to get any shot. And it is just, it's devastating. Washington, Eva, we can continue conversation, but did you prepare a reading? Will you share something with us?
Yes, we both wrote a couple of lines, and what we'd like to do is, one of the aspects of our work is that they're sort of multilingual in all kinds of ways. So what we'll have is we'll share the text on the screen in English, and then Washington will first recite the lines in a mixture of Luo and Swahili, and then I'll do it in Swiss German. So Frank, don't be confused if you don't understand me. I'm speaking your language 500 years ago.
Okay.
Washington, shall we have a go?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Give me a moment to get the English text on the screen, and then, let's see. Right.
Okay, I will start. I'll go first. I'll read the first stanza with my mother tongue, my first language, which is a Luo. I'm a Luo, so I will read it with my mother tongue. Now the title is Artist's Grave, so that is Yuak Mar Artist. COVID no obiro di buombe, kagoyo koko, kendo ne duongo dhoudni. To ere iwe?
Künstler sind Schmerz. Psychisch gekommen, geflügelt, schreiend mit Karacho vor unsere Tür. Aber wo ist jetzt ihre Stachel?
This is a Kiswahili translation. Huzuni inatuambia imeisha, lakini bado mioyo yetu ingali inazunika.
Der Schmerz sagt uns, es ist vorbei. Und das Herz sagt, es ist Gegenwart.
Kawanyalo weyo chunywa mondo onyiswa ni masira oserumo. To ng'eyo gimomiyo wanyalo buok kendo wanyalo kweyo piny.
Wenn wir nur glauben könnten, dass Ärgst vorbei ist, könnte es vielleicht besser werden. Wenn wir nur den Grund könnten verstehen, könnten wir lächeln und den Tränenstrom abtupfen.
Chochote tutaletewa na kizazi zijayo, ama chochote tutakumbana nayo baada ya corona, baada ya corona kuisha, bado haitabadilisha uchungu corona ilituletea. Lakini nina imani kwamba watu ambao tuliwapoteza watakuwa wanatuangalia kwa furaha, wakitabasamu na kusema tumeshinda corona kwa sababu hatukukufa moyo.
Egal was kommt, in der Zukunft oder nach der Seuche, die wir verloren haben, schauen freundlich auf uns ab und sagen, gut gemacht, habt ihr nicht aufgegeben.
Na spirits zao zitazidi kukua na sisi. Mola aweke nyoyo zao mahali pema peponi.
Und im Geist werden sie immer bei uns sein. Mögen sie Ruhe und Frieden finden. And then the answer is the answer to the grieving friend.
Yuak mar osiep. Ka anyalo temo wacho ni bed gi kwe, yani ang'eyo lit mi ikale to anyalo bedo ka awuondou. Chal kaka anyalo sayo jaduong' ma piny osechamo mondo obed gi mor kata othagore.
Für einen lieben Mensch, der trauert. Wenn ich dir sagen will, komm, lass dich trösten, dann meine ich eigentlich, mich frisst dein Schmerz. Was gar nicht so viel anders ist als denen, wo du den alten Mann angefleht hast zu bleiben.
Tumelelewa tukijua tunaweza saidia kila kitu na kupima tabia zetu na uzito wao. Kuona wapendwa wetu wakiumia, wakilia na kuhuzunika. Hiyo tu ni dhibitisho ya kwamba tumefeli.
Wir glauben ja, wir müssen alles flicken. Und das Resultat, das gibt dem Handeln Wert. Wenn jemand vor uns trauert, grennt, leidet, dann haben wir das Gefühl, wir haben da versagt.
Lakini haukutoka nyumbani kwake. Ulikaa karibu na yeye. Ingali matumaini ilishakuondokea. Bali ulimpatia kila kitu uwezavyo. Ambaye ni wewe. Itakuwaje uliamua kuwa hivyo?
Und trotzdem bist du in dem Zimmer geblieben, wo man lang gewusst hat, dass es nicht mehr wird. Und hast das gegeben, wo nur du kannst, dies da sein.
Bila kutarajia chochote, ulihakikisha kuwa uko hapo na yeye. Ulimshikilia na kuishi pamoja.
Die Demut, die du gehabt hast, lehrt mich jetzt. Es braucht kein Wollen, machen, helfen, tun. Stattdessen Schnuff und Raum und einfach da sein.
Wonderful, wonderful. Really, really, really thank you. Yeah, so what it said, no matter what the future will bring, we have to go on. And at the very end, Eva, you also related actually to this ancient Sanskrit poem that Pradeep sang to us and spoke to us, that is about presence, and being there in the moment. This is quite stunning. So how did you collaborate for this? You went back and forth over email, Zoom for this reading, or you had it already written, or you created it for this marathon?
We created it for this marathon. Our main means of communication, weirdly, is WhatsApp. And it's quite interesting that we sort of both went into our rooms and wrote something, and then it turns out that Washington has written a lament and I've written a consolation. So we're like, oh, that's interesting.
It's like an old Greek concept of theater, the lament and the consolation. And then you could say, what's up? You say a poem, that's what's up. And so it came up. So that is fantastic. Abhishek, what do you think?
I think it's very beautiful. Thank you, Eva and Washington, for sharing that. And of course, Rupali and Pradeep for everything that you have shared. And hello, Anne. So good to see you again.
So you guys know each other, right? Tell us a bit.
Anne is my godmother in New York City. And she's godmother to many people in New York City. And I'm one of those children who wander in the world.
And one to Washington too, right? Yes. And his children, yes.
Yeah.
How did you guys meet, Abhishek, you and Anne?
The first time I met Anne was at the Lincoln Center Director's Lab.
You applied and she let you in.
She let me in, yeah. And then she kept me. And then since then, she has been letting me in several times. And I never fail to meet her when I go there. So it's always great to meet Anne. I was just saying that, one of the things I was thinking of, I'm really intrigued by this survey that Rupali and Pradeep were talking about. I didn't know that there was such a concrete survey that both of you have done about, the correlation between coronavirus and theater. Obviously, it's so great that this has happened. But I think if we do a survey of theater and totalitarianism, there is an inverse correlation. So essentially, the idea of shutting down theaters very quickly is something we see very often. Like in India, they would do a religious function with 1 million people, but not open a theater with 20 people.
Yeah.
And I think the correlation is with this other virus of totalitarianism. Then
I remember Abhishek said, when we had a Siegel talk, I said, does your theater has relevance? Do you feel it has impact? He says, if my theater gets shut down, by the government, but the movies and the million people relations stay open, yes, it has an impact. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. We had our talks with Poland, and the Polish people said, we are on the same level with sex workers. We were like on the lowest, and when massage sex salons will reopen, then also theaters will open, and it just shows you what the people in power think of it. And welcome. Tell us a little bit about you for those people who don't know who you are.
Hi, everyone. Well, I'm basically here because I always do what Frank tells me. And so I'm very glad to see many old friends. And I know many people on this call through this program, the Lincoln Center Directors Lab, that I've been running for 25 years. So it's nice to see you all. I don't have anything prepared. I'm feeling bad about that.
No.
But I did want to come with a slightly different point of view, maybe, and that's this. I think the main thing that we have to realize is that we don't know so much yet. We know a lot, and every day that goes by, we begin to know more scientifically about how the virus sheds. I'm in the middle of New York City. I've been locked in an apartment for over 15 months, not far from Frank's apartment. We actually saw each other for the first time after a year. And we were the epicenter of the first wave of the virus. And we had absolutely no idea why. We just knew that the streets were filled with stretchers and people were pouring into hospitals. Well, the answer turns out to have emerged a couple of months later, which is the reason that New York was the epicenter was because we have 3 huge airports in New York. They don't have them in Texas or Colorado or California. We have LaGuardia, Kennedy, and Newark. And everyone thought the virus was coming from China, so flights from China were restricted. But actually, I think the virus was coming from Switzerland, Eva. I think it was a skier who came with the first variants, a super spreader, went home, went to church, and then just suddenly 300,000 people got sick, and no one had any idea. So I think it's, first of all, important to remember that not only do we have a medical emergency, we have a sort of psychic emergency of distrust and anger and lack of information. And people are jumping on people. You're not telling us this, or they're doing this for this reason. And sometimes that turns out to be true, and sometimes that turns out to be not true at all, because we simply don't know enough yet. The one thing that I wanted to say specifically that was very impressive to me was when I was in school, in college, my roommate was a scientist, a cell biologist, who's been a professor of cell biology now for many years. We're all old. So of course I called her when this began, and she said within 24 hours, there was an international Twitter feed of scientists, and everyone in the world was on that Twitter feed, and everyone just started posting everything that they thought, they found, they had tried, etc. She said it was the largest Twitter feed she'd ever seen. And I think it actually began because a scientist was at the airport in China speaking to a friend who was a scientist in Australia, and they were just about to board and said, okay, I'm just gonna upload the DNA profile of this virus. And that got it to Australia, not the virus, the profile, and then they sent it around the world. And at one point she said students at the University of Washington were doing more sequencing than any part in the world, any group in the world. And so I think for us as theater people, there's something to be said for staying in touch, making work, sharing, that doesn't, that brings out what we do best, which is collaborating, which is making work that we know how to make. We can assume, since we're not stupid, that people will be profiteering off of this, that people will be using this for political purposes, but that's not what we do. We do something very different. And I think that one of the great miracles of this past year was the speed in which a reverse RNA virus was sequenced, a vaccine was made that actually works. I mean, that would have normally taken 10 years, and it was done completely internationally. It wasn't one country that did it. It was a worldwide group of scientists. And then the next step was manufacturing it. And that was a nightmare. until people began to figure that out. And now we have to get it out to people, but we at least know that it is effective. So to me, in the middle of this, I'm still in the theater district in New York. I'm trying to keep my head together, although it's not easy, to focus on what I actually know, not what I suspect. And I of course know that everybody is going to be, profiteering from this, not telling the truth. That's just the way that life is. But I think you have to stay, as we do in theater, with people you collaborate with, that you love, and keep yourself and your family safe. Unfortunately, I don't have, none of us, I don't think, have a way of taking those doses that Eva saw thrown out at the pharmacy in Switzerland and transporting them. But the stories that we can tell, and the ideal that we have of not attacking one another, of staying together, is what we have to offer in this. And we thought it was beginning to be over. It will be over, we know that. It's just a question of how much more we have to go through. And each of us are talking from different parts of the world. We're in different stages of this. If you had spoken to me this time last year, I would have been in a totally different place. Yeah. But we're beginning to emerge from this. But now we have other political divisions. We need to get these vaccines out to the rest of the world. They have to be distributed to the rest of the world. And I don't know that there's a role for theater in that, but perhaps ideally we could find a way. It'd be nice if theaters would become vaccination sites, that people would need to come to us to get vaccinated. But I think it's that feeling of love and of community is something that we know how to do, surrounded by people who are doing things for reasons so awful that we don't even want to talk about them.
I mean, it shows the extreme, like in war, someone said, I think James Hillman wrote a book about war where he said it brings out the very best, the worst, the absolute worst, but also the mankind and love. And I think in a way we see the Abhisheks on one hand who stay up night after night in his team and everybody to save lives. And then you see, people who, put up fake vaccination passports, or do price gouging. It's incredible. And I also know, maybe it must be of interest for our viewers and for your colleagues, your neighborhood changed, more than that. Maybe tell a little bit. There was nobody, when I tell people that they don't believe me fully, but tell a little bit about your neighborhood. What happened in COVID?
Yeah, I actually live very close. I'm in the theater district. And this is the place that you watch on New Year's Eve when you see the ball come down and the whole world is crammed into Times Square. And my husband walked to his studio every morning for the last 16 months. And for maybe 14 months of that, Times Square, he was the only person in Times Square. Everyone in the city left. Not everyone in this part of the city left. The newspapers left. There's no reporting on what's going on here. So things are just beginning to, people are just beginning to come back. But we have been like a deserted city. I think it's happened once before during the terrible 70s, but it's been pretty shocking to see everything that's happened. And I know the theaters want to reopen, and the politicians, of course, want to reopen so they can make money from people coming in as tourists. And of course, the businesses are desperate for restaurants and stores. But I think we still have a ways to go. I think probably it's going to be close to December before we begin to be anywhere normal.
And all the hotels in your neighborhood, were then used for people who were homeless people. All the New York prisons are so badly run. So many people were infected or died by COVID. They took low offenders, whatever, out of the prisons, put them in the hotels next to it. But of course, and they could go out, I think, till 5 o'clock was a curfew or something. So the entire street scene of New York City changed.
Yeah, till 10 o'clock. Yeah.
Or till 10.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been something. I mean, first we had 9/11 and now we had this. New York seems to be the headquarters of all kinds of terrible events, and we hope we have the spirit to get through this. And I think the fact, Frank, that you have put this enormous event together, spanning the globe, is a good inspiration for all of us, that if we stay connected, we can get through it.
Yeah, that is quite something. And you're also a dramaturg. You're a dramaturg at the Lincoln Center Theater, which in a way fulfills a role almost of a national theater, or Théâtre National, as our friend said before, from Strasbourg and whatever. So what do you see? What impact does this really have on theater?
I think there's so many changes that are happening now in the theater, politically, etc. And I think maybe I'm just an optimistic person, but I think all of the changes will be difficult, very difficult, but I think they will be good. I think things need to be rethought periodically. The first theater I worked for was called the Phoenix Theater. Phoenix being the classical bird that every 7 years dies and is reborn from his ashes. And actually this theater closed every 7 years and everyone was fired. And then it was revived in a different location, different theater, doing a different repertory. And it was a very good way to make theater. It allowed change. It allowed you to look around and say, the world is very different from what it was 7 years ago. And I think that will happen. Different voices, different models. I'm very interested in what's happening in the United States outside of New York. There's so many, maybe I see that from the directors' labs, so many directors, just as many directors are on your Zoom call from around the world. We have directors from every state. I mean, there are huge communities of directors in Utah and Idaho and New Mexico and places that you just never hear of because of no coverage. So I think things are going to move from very high-priced schools into theaters that are actually serving communities, that are producing plays that are about the communities, that are finding audiences in the communities. I don't know how all that's going to be done. And I don't think New York theater will disappear. It will never disappear. There will always be Hamilton. But I think there will be a phoenix-like resurrection, just as there will be in so many aspects of life. But I would be a fool if I could tell you what it's going to look like. But I'm impressed that you've organized this, Frank, that something that no one could imagine.
No, we were lucky, that it was this, and then also Abhishek and Tanvi, who hopefully she will join us the next session, put together. But one of the first notices I got, Broadway is reopening. Michael Jackson, the show will come.
No, Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, I know. At the time they thought it would be earlier, but it of course didn't work out. But is that what people want to see? Do you think it will be similar? Or will people say, actually, this is not what we need to see? What do you think?
Well, I only have 2 minutes left. I think that it's not called show business.
We can go a little bit over time. Jin couldn't join us, so we have a little bit of more time.
I think they call it show business for a reason. And the business part is very important in New York. I mean, the theater is it's not the top, but I think it's the third largest employer in the metropolitan area. And so we think of it because we're writers, we're directors, but don't forget that there are musicians, there are house managers, there are union technicians, there are box office people, there are carpenters. I mean, all of these people belong to unions. They're very, very well paid. So it's very hard in New York to make professional theater, which means unionized theater, theater like Lincoln Center. It's the case with every major theater probably in the world, without having a lot of people attend, and those people have to pay money. And that, if that doesn't happen, the theater can't stay alive, because it's got what we call a nut, which is the amount of money you have to make every week to pay the person who says hello in the lobby, or sells you the ticket, or takes you down the aisle, the ushers, the dressers who dress the actors. I mean, it's an enormous, enormous enterprise. I mean, we can't, I mean, this is going to be, I'm the only person on the Zoom call who's going to say something so crazy, controversial, but after 9/11, which was our other enormous event, that was a Tuesday morning. I was at home, also downtown, very close to the center. We had a mayor, a sort of mediocre mayor, who stepped up and became a fantastic mayor after 9/11. Then he kind of went insane. But his two things that he accomplished was Thursday, so 48 hours after 9/11, he ordered Broadway to reopen. He called the unions in New Jersey. They all live in houses in New Jersey. They don't live in New York, and said, we're opening every show on Broadway Thursday night. And he opened the baseball stadium. And one of the great baseball players, Mike Piazza, hit a home run on Friday night. And somehow the morale of opening the Broadway shows, opening the sports stadiums, I mean, it's different than COVID. You didn't have to worry about being infected, but people were still very frightened about what was happening. There was something about that that brought the city comfort. It was the theater, and it was baseball, a sport that doesn't even exist outside of Japan and America. So I think our situation in New York is very different from the theater that you're making with communities that are smaller. Lincoln Center is a very big space, but it's going to be hard to bring people back comfortably in the numbers that you need to keep it going. And that's, you know, I personally don't think it's going to be happening much before November, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, but I also mean, will themes change? Will that really attract people? I mean, Carl Jung, the great psychoanalyst, said, you know, a cultural symbol releases more energy than you put in. A Woodstock concert released energy. The same concert today wouldn't have that response. So will the stories be, even on the commercial one or on the Lincoln Center theater, will they be different?
Well, it's not like Lincoln Center makes the stories. It's the artists who make the stories.
Mm-hmm. But you pick up stories that exist.
Yes,
also.
and that's what we want to do, what we hope to do. I think, you know, people talk about Broadway. I've just been talking about Broadway because it's so big and such an economic engine. But don't forget, there are like 300 theaters in the city. Yeah. And so there's so much room for a range of material, and everybody I know has been home writing. Mm-hmm. So I'm waiting to see what comes out when I'm allowed back into the office, which I'm.
You're also not allowed back in the office. You're not back.
Yeah, I mean, I can go in for 2 hours every 2 weeks alone, just to print things, you know. But no, we haven't seen each other in 1.5 years of my staff. Yeah.
Well, that is just, it's incredible to think and what that means to a theater. I mean, we had that statistic, the Oscars, which is such a big screening, 50% less people watched it. And the big question is, if you break down 2 years, you don't go to movie theaters, will people come back, you know? And
well, that's because all the movies that people want to see, they didn't release them, they held them. So as soon as we can go back to movie theaters, there are going to be a lot of good movies. They're made, they're in the can, they're just not released because they won't make enough money until people can go back. So we can all go see, speaking of art, we can all go see the James Bond movie when it finally is released.
We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, I think that, you know, in sports, I think youth sports, because for 2 years, kids have stopped joining teams. You know, the idea to, you know, become the young baseball player, whatever. So things are changing what it will be. So we will see where it all will go. I think we can slowly transition to our next
Thank you.
session. We went a little bit over time, but we started a tiny bit late. Eva in Washington, really thank you for joining us, for writing those beautiful words. Rupali and Pradeep, thank you for joining and for keeping up the ideas and the wish and your space in Rajasthan, and thank you for being with us. It's a great privilege as always to have you in your mind.